Some ancient rocks never carried gold alone. What they held was often far more complex. A buried record of quartz, of sulfides, of altered host rock, of mineral-rich fluids, of crystal systems, of heavy minerals, of deep earth processes that created more than one kind of hidden value at the same time. That is one of the most important things to understand about old mineral ground, because many people think of gold as a single target, a single metal, a single clue, a single reward hidden in rock. But in geology, gold often belongs to something larger, a broader mineral system, a deeper story, a more complex environment of heat, pressure, structure, fluids, and chemistry that left behind more than one sign, more than one material, and often more than one form of value. That is what this video is about, why some ancient rocks carried more than gold alone. Because old rock is rarely important for one reason only. It matters because it preserves context, and in many cases, that context is the real key. The quartz beside the gold, the altered host rock around it, the sulfides that formed in the same system, the crystals or heavy minerals later released into slopes, streams, and gravels below. All of these are part of the same geological memory, and once that becomes clear, old rock starts making much more sense. The first truth is simple: gold rarely formed in isolation. That is where everything begins. When people imagine gold in rock, they often imagine a single hidden streak, a single prize waiting in stone. But the Earth does not usually work that way. Gold-bearing systems often formed in environments where several things were happening at once. Rock was broken, fluids were moving, heat was present, pressure was changing, chemistry was active. Minerals were being carried, deposited, replaced, or altered through the same broader system. That means ancient rock that carried gold often carried much more than gold. It carried evidence of the whole system. This is critical, because the rock itself may preserve a wider story than any one visible metal could ever tell on its own. A gold-bearing rock may also hold quartz veins, altered zones, iron staining from oxidized sulfides, changes in texture or color in the host, associated minerals that once formed from the same fluids, clues of pressure, fracture, and structural control. That is why old mineral ground feels richer than a simple target. It is not only about what is there, it is about what happened there. And the second truth follows naturally from the first. The same buried processes that formed gold often formed more than gold. This is where deep earth geology becomes essential. Far below the surface, under heat and pressure, mineral-rich fluids can move through broken rock. They travel through fractures, through faults, through shear zones, through the spaces where the crust once opened enough to allow movement. And those fluids do not always carry only one thing. They may carry silica, metals, sulfur, other dissolved elements and compounds. They may interact with host rock, change chemistry, cool, react, and leave behind more than one kind of mineral trace. That is how broader hydrothermal systems work. And that is why old rocks so often preserve mixed mineral stories. Quartz may form as one of the clearest visible results. Sulfides may form beside or around it. Gold may be present as part of that system, but not the whole of it. Alteration may spread through the surrounding rock as fluids change the host. Other trace minerals may remain even if the gold itself is subtle or hard to see. That is what makes ancient rocks so important. They are not only containers, they are survivors of a whole process. And one of the most visible survivors in that process is often quartz. This is why quartz matters so much in old rock. Quartz is not gold. That is worth stating clearly. But quartz often outlives the system that formed it better than many other clues do. It is durable. It survives weathering. It can remain visible long after softer materials have changed or disappeared. It often marks the path old fluids once used. That makes quartz one of the great visible memories in ancient mineral ground. A white vein cutting through dark rock, broken quartz fragments on a weathered slope, a belt of quartz-bearing fractures repeated across old mountain terrain. These may not prove gold on their own, but they may reveal the track of an older fluid system that once carried a broader mineral story through the rock. That is why some ancient rocks carried more than gold alone, because quartz was often part of the same event, the same fluid movement, the same fracture system, the same buried phase of mineral formation. And sometimes quartz is what still remains when other parts of the system have become harder to recognize. That makes it an invaluable witness, not the entire story, but a strong, surviving part of it. The same is true for alteration. Ancient rocks often preserve alteration as another companion to gold. This is one of the most important but most overlooked parts of mineral ground. Fluids do not only deposit minerals, they change rock. They bleach it, oxidize it, soften it, replace original minerals, create zones of staining, weathering, or chemical weakness that later become visible at the surface. That matters because ancient rock can still preserve the companions of gold, even when gold itself is not obvious. Iron staining may remain. Oxidized sulfides may leave rust-colored zones. Host rock may look different where fluids once passed through it. The same belt of stone may weather differently from the ground around it. These are not small details. They are signs that the rock remembers more than one mineral phase. Gold may have been present. Quartz may have been present. Sulfides may have been present. Alteration certainly may have been present. And together, these clues make the old rock much richer in meaning than gold alone would suggest. This is especially important because ancient rocks do not only matter for metals. Some old systems also contributed to crystals, gems, and heavy minerals. This is where the story opens wider, because a broader mineral system can feed more than one visible outcome into the landscape. A quartz-rich system may produce strong quartz fragments downslope. A crystal-bearing zone may release durable mineral pieces into adjacent ground. Heavy minerals may weather out of source rock and later concentrate in streams. Gem gravels may inherit material from older mineralized mountain belts, even when the source rock is no longer cleanly exposed. That does not mean every old gold-bearing rock also contains gems, but it does mean some ancient rocks mattered because they belonged to larger mineral families, larger geological systems, systems where gold was not alone, but one expression of a broader buried event. This is a much more powerful way to look at old terrain, because now the land is not being read as one target. It is being read as one integrated mineral story. Quartz on the ridge, alteration in the host, heavy minerals in the drainage, crystalline fragments in gravel, gold in the lower ground. All of these may belong to one larger ancient process. And that is why ancient rocks can feel so rich in implication. They preserve layers of meaning, not only what they once contained, but what they later fed into the wider terrain. This is where erosion becomes crucial, because once ancient rock is lifted and exposed, it does not keep all of its clues locked inside forever. Weathering begins, breakage begins, material is released. Quartz fragments move downslope, altered pieces enter runoff lines. Heavy minerals begin working into gullies and streams. Old mineral companions separate into different transport stories depending on their durability, density, and form. This means the landscape below old rock often inherits more than just one clue. It inherits the broader mineral memory of the source above. That is why lower terrain can sometimes tell a fuller story than a single outcrop. The slope may hold quartz fragments. The drainage may hold heavy concentrates. Old gravels may preserve the denser survivors. A stream may carry the worn remains of a whole source system long after the original rock body is partly weathered away. That is a profound idea, because it means ancient rock does not only matter in place, it matters in motion. The mountain remembers formation. The slope remembers release. The stream remembers transport. The gravel remembers sorting and preservation. That is how some ancient rocks carried more than gold alone. They fed more than one clue into the land. They created a larger pattern. And patterns are what matter most in old ground, not isolated signs. A single quartz piece means little by itself. A rust stain alone means little. One heavy mineral in a pan means little. But when quartz, altered rock, structural logic, repeated fragments downslope, and heavy materials in lower ground begin agreeing, the landscape starts showing you something bigger. Now the old rock is no longer a single clue. It becomes the center of a coherent system. And coherence is what makes ancient mineral ground believable. This is one reason old rocks are often richer in meaning than they appear. They may look simple on the surface: a weathered outcrop, a broken ridge, a quartz seam, a stained belt of rock. But beneath that plain appearance may be a long history of fracture, fluid movement, mineral deposition, alteration, release, and transport. That is much more important than any single visual impression. Because geology is rarely about one sign. It is about the relationship between signs. And old rock is especially powerful because it often preserves those relationships even after enormous spans of time. Quartz still marks where fluids once moved. Alteration still marks where chemistry changed the host. Sulfide weathering still leaves traces. Heavy minerals still survive transport better than lighter material. The lower landscape still carries fragments of the old story. That is why ancient rocks matter so much as records, not only as potential sources, as records. They preserve context, and in many cases, context is more valuable than the most obvious clue. Because context explains why the clue exists at all. That may be the deepest lesson here. To understand old gold-bearing rock well, you have to understand the larger mineral world it belonged to. The gold did not arrive alone. It formed in a system. It shared pathways with other minerals. It shared geology with quartz. It shared structure with faults and fractures. It shared weathering history with altered host rock. It shared transport history with heavy materials later released into the terrain. That is what makes old rock so powerful in the field of thought, even when it looks quiet in the field of sight. It is richer in memory than it first appears. And perhaps that is the greatest difference between surface-looking and geological reading. Surface-looking asks, is there gold here? Geological reading asks, what system did this rock belong to, and what else does it still remember? That is the better question. Because ancient rocks are often important not only because they contain something valuable, but because they preserve the wider process that made value possible in the first place. This is why some ancient rocks carried more than gold alone. They carried the signature of a much larger buried world. A world of deep heat, broken crust, moving fluids, quartz pathways, sulfides, altered host rock, released fragments, heavy minerals, and later the spread of that old story into slopes, streams, and gravels below. That is a very different way of thinking, and it is a much more powerful one, because it means the old rock is not just a target, it is testimony. Testimony of how the earth worked when the system was alive. So if there is one truth worth carrying away from this whole subject, it is this. Some ancient rocks were never important because they carried gold alone. They mattered because they preserved the larger mineral system the gold belonged to. If you enjoy thoughtful videos about gold, geology, old rocks, hidden minerals, quartz, crystals, and the deeper history still written into the land, please subscribe to the channel. Because once you begin looking beyond the gold itself, ancient rock starts telling a much bigger story than most people ever realize. And often, that larger story is where the deepest understanding begins.